I've never handled silence well, not the kind that comes when the world is asleep and the shadows stretch longer than they should. I'm talking about that deep, unnatural silence, the kind that presses in from all sides, making your ears ring until you start imagining things that aren't really there. Even as a kid, I hated being alone in tight spaces. Closets, crawl spaces, even elevators made me sweat. My chest would tighten, and I'd feel like the air was thinning, like the walls were inching closer every second. My parents thought it was claustrophobia. I thought maybe I was just weird. But it wasn't until I got older that I realized something was wrong. Deeply wrong. There was always this fear, buried beneath everything else. A fear I couldn't explain. Like something was coming for me. And it would come when I was completely helpless. Buried, maybe. Trapped. Forgotten. My grandfather used to say strange things when he thought no one was listening. He was quiet most of the time, lost in his own world. But every now and then, he'd say something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. One of us, he mumbled once, rocking slowly in his chair, gets buried alive. Every other generation. That's the curse. It's always been that way. I asked him what he meant, but he just looked past me, eyes clouded with something heavy. He never answered. I tried to forget it. I told myself he was just old, confused, that it was some creepy family superstition or a tale he made up to scare me. But I didn't forget. I couldn't, because not long after that, I started having dreams. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart hammering. In the dreams, I was lying in a small, wooden box. There was no light, no sound, just my own breathing. Fast, shallow, desperate. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. All I could do was wait. And then there was the knocking. That's the part I still can't explain. For months, I'd hear it at night. 3 soft knocks, like someone tapping on the wall just behind my headboard. I lived alone. No one else had access to the apartment. I checked every time and there was nothing there. No loose pipes, no tree branches, just the knocks. I told myself it was stress, that I was tired, overworked, imagining things. But that didn't explain the dreams. It didn't explain the cold that seemed to seep into my bones every time I heard those knocks. I started to wonder, what if my grandfather was right? What if the curse was real? And what if it was meant for me? I started digging through some of my grandfather's old things not long after he passed. Part of me felt guilty. The man had barely been buried when I found myself in his attic, surrounded by trunks of dusty clothes, moth-eaten blankets, and old, curling photographs. But something kept pushing me up there. A pull I couldn't explain, like there was something I was supposed to find. At first, it was just the usual junk. Faded army memorabilia, a few handwritten letters in cursive I could barely read, a cracked watch with a name engraved on the back, someone I'd never heard of. But in the very bottom of a cedar chest, beneath layers of flannel and brittle newspaper clippings, I found a leather-bound journal. The pages were yellowed and stiff, and the handwriting inside looked shaky. My grandfather's. It started innocently enough. Notes about the weather, what he ate, a dream he had. But then the tone shifted. He started mentioning the fear. The way the house would grow colder around midnight. The knocking. Always the knocking. He wrote that it started when he was 27. That's the same age I was when I found the journal. He described the exact same dreams I'd been having. The coffin, the darkness, the helplessness. He wrote that his own grandfather had warned him about the family curse, just like he'd warned me. He hadn't believed it either, not at first, but it haunted him, followed him, took things from him. He mentioned an incident when he was 30, when he collapsed during a work shift and was declared dead for several minutes. He wrote that he woke up in the morgue just before they were going to embalm him. The technician had stepped out for a smoke. He managed to kick the drawer door open enough to make a noise. Just enough. Barely enough. I remember reading that line over and over again. Just enough. Barely enough. I didn't want to believe it. Who would? It sounded like the ramblings of a man slipping into senility. But there were newspaper clippings in the chest. Real ones. Dated and yellowed, but legit. One mentioned the incident. His name was there. He had actually been reported dead. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the doctors got it wrong. Maybe it was one of those medical flukes where someone flatlines for a few seconds and then comes back. Maybe that was it. But deep down, I knew. It wasn't a mistake. It was the curse making its first move. The knocking got worse after that. It started following me. Not just in my apartment anymore. I heard it when I stayed over at a friend's place, in a hotel room during a business trip. Once, in a bathroom stall at the airport. Always 3 knocks, always faint, but never ignorable. I started losing sleep. My appetite vanished. I kept seeing shapes in the corners of rooms, faces in mirrors that didn't quite match mine. People at work noticed. My boss called me in for a wellness check, said I looked pale, said I seemed distracted. I quit the next day. I couldn't be around people. I couldn't fake it anymore. I went back to my grandfather's house, sat in the attic with his journal and read it, cover to cover again. The final entry stuck with me more than anything else. It was short, and I could tell his handwriting was weak, like his hand had been shaking. Still knocking. 37 years now. I think it's waiting. Waiting. That's what I couldn't get out of my head. Not coming, not attacking. Waiting. But for what? The next night, I dreamed of a funeral. Mine. I watched the whole thing as if I were floating just above the casket. My mother sobbed. My brother stood stiffly in the corner. No one knew I was still alive inside the box. I could see myself lying there, eyes closed, unmoving. But I felt it, the urge to scream, to move, to do anything. But my body just lay there while everyone said goodbye. And then I woke up, breathless, and the knocking started again. This time, it wasn't behind the wall. It was coming from the floorboards, directly under my bed. I didn't sleep the night after I heard the knocking under my bed. I couldn't. I just sat in the corner of the room with my knees pulled to my chest, the light on, eyes glued to the floor like it might crack open at any moment. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, that maybe I had finally lost my grip, that this was just stress, exhaustion, or maybe a lingering echo of my grandfather's madness. But it felt real, too real. I didn't go back to my apartment after that night. I packed a bag and checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town. Something about the beige wallpaper and the constant hum of the vending machine down the hall made me feel safer. It was temporary, but I needed space, distance, something to break the rhythm. The first night at the motel was calm. No knocking, no dreams. I almost started to believe it was all in my head. But then, the second night, I saw something. It was around 3 a.m. I hadn't fallen asleep yet. I was staring at the ceiling, counting the stains, trying to keep my thoughts from spiraling. I turned my head toward the small window, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement outside. There was a figure, standing completely still, no expression, just watching. At first, I assumed it was a drunk or some random weirdo off the highway. I sat up, heart pounding, and pulled the curtain aside. But when I looked again, there was no one there. The parking lot was empty, silent, not even a car driving by. I chalked it up to paranoia, but the next morning, I found 3 shallow scratch marks running down the glass, as if someone had dragged their nails slowly across the window during the night. I didn't report it. I didn't want to explain. What would I even say? That a ghost or a curse was stalking me through motel windows? Instead, I moved rooms, then motels, then cities. No matter where I went, it followed. The knocking, the figure, the dreams, always the same. Me, locked in a coffin, screaming with no sound, scratching at the wood until my fingers bled. Sometimes I'd wake up with my nails bent back or blood on my fingertips. I didn't remember doing it. I started wearing gloves to sleep, just in case I was hurting myself without realizing it. I avoided mirrors. I stopped answering calls. I stopped replying to texts. I was unraveling, and I knew it, but I couldn't pull myself back together. Eventually, I returned to my hometown. I was out of money, out of energy, and dangerously close to believing my fate was already sealed. My grandfather's house was still empty. I had the keys. It felt wrong to go back there, like I was walking into a trap. But I had nowhere else to go. When I stepped inside, the air felt thick, stale, like the house hadn't breathed in months. I made my way upstairs and stood in the attic doorway, the journal still sitting where I'd left it. Only now, it was open, and the final page, the one where my grandfather had written that chilling line about the knocking waiting, was torn out. That's when I started feeling like something was living in the house, not with me, inside it, in the walls, the vents, the shadows that pooled in the corners after dark. I'd hear footsteps in the hallway when I was in the attic, the creak of doors opening slowly when I was trying to sleep. Sometimes I'd wake up with the blanket tucked tightly around me, so tight I couldn't move. I lived alone, and always, the knocking, never random, always 3, always, right before I lost consciousness. That's when I realized something awful. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a countdown. It was the 3rd night back in my grandfather's house when I collapsed. I remember bits of it. I had been pacing the living room, talking to myself, trying to piece together every strange incident like a puzzle that refused to fit. The knocking had happened again the night before, this time under the couch I was sleeping on. I dragged the whole thing across the room and searched beneath it with a flashlight. Nothing. No signs of tampering, no cracks in the floorboards, no vermin. Just a cold, dense feeling, like the air had weight, like something was sitting just beneath the surface, watching, waiting for me to fall asleep again. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. My head felt like it was full of smoke. When I finally collapsed, it wasn't dramatic. No screams, no panic. I simply crumpled in place like a marionette with its strings cut. I came to some time later in an ambulance. The paramedic said I was lucky. Said my vitals had flatlined for almost 2 minutes. Said I must have had a heart episode, likely from stress, dehydration, maybe exhaustion. They told me it was a miracle I came back. But it didn't feel like a miracle. It felt like something let me go. I was admitted for observation. The hospital room was bland, quiet, sterile. I thought I would feel safe there, surrounded by people and machines, but instead I felt like a guest inside my own body. Like something was off. Something had changed. The second night in the hospital, I dreamt I was buried again. But this time it wasn't a dream. I could feel the fabric of the hospital gown against my skin. I could smell antiseptic. I heard voices, faint, blurred, speaking about me, not to me. Then those voices faded and I was underground again. But this time I wasn't alone. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel a presence, pressed up beside me in the box, breathing slowly, shallowly, matching my every inhalation. I couldn't speak, couldn't scream. I just lay there, paralyzed, while whatever it was shared the coffin with me. I don't know how long it lasted. Hours, maybe minutes. Time didn't work right in that place. All I know is that when I finally woke up, I couldn't move my limbs. I could see, I could hear, but I couldn't move or speak. The doctors called it a temporary episode of sleep paralysis, but I knew better. It wasn't sleep. I had been somewhere else, and something had been there with me. After a few days, they discharged me. My vitals were normal, no signs of long-term damage. They prescribed some pills for anxiety and told me to focus on recovery. I didn't go back to the house immediately. I wandered instead, drifting between cheap motels and late-night diners, trying to avoid sleep. But it didn't help. The dreams followed. The knocking got louder, louder and closer. And one night I saw my own face. I was brushing my teeth in a hotel bathroom. I looked up into the mirror, and there I was, of course, pale, tired, hollow-eyed. But then I blinked, and the reflection didn't. It just stared. Its lips parted slightly, not in surprise or speech or mimicry. It smiled. A slow, sickly curl of the mouth that didn't belong on my face. I dropped the toothbrush. When I looked again, the reflection was normal. I haven't looked into a mirror since. I don't think that thing in the dream left me. I think it's still with me, still inside me. And whatever's knocking, it's not asking to come in anymore. It's asking to be let out. I don't remember the accident, not the impact, not the sound, not even the moments leading up to it. One minute I was driving, miles from town, trying to clear my head, thinking that if I just kept moving, whatever was haunting me couldn't keep up. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a drawer. I couldn't see anything at first. Everything was dark and cold and still. The air was metallic and tight, like it had already been used up. Then came the pressure, weight on my chest, a stiffness in my limbs like rigor mortis had already begun to claim me. I realized I was lying on my back, completely flat, and surrounded by hard surfaces on every side. My thoughts scrambled, panicked, clawing for an explanation, and then it hit me. I was in the morgue, the drawer. My breath caught in my throat, not because of fear, but because my lungs wouldn't cooperate. My mouth was slightly open, but I couldn't form words, couldn't cry out. My muscles wouldn't move. My hands were locked in place. My legs felt like they were tied down, though I knew they weren't. I wasn't dead. I was paralyzed, buried not in dirt, but in cold metal. Some distant part of me remembered hearing about it once. Lazarus syndrome, auto-resuscitation. The body can appear dead for a short while, then restart on its own. Rare. Rare enough that morgues aren't trained to expect it. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I don't know how long I was in that drawer before someone opened it. But I do remember the moment it happened. The light seared my eyes and the sudden burst of fresh, icy air flooded into the space around me. A face appeared, blurry, shocked. A technician. He dropped his clipboard. I couldn't speak, but I was awake, very much awake. They rushed me back into the hospital. Tests, monitoring, whispering nurses and wide-eyed doctors circling my bed. Words like miracle and unbelievable kept getting tossed around. Someone asked if I had a history of seizures. Another asked if I was on any medications. Nobody had answers. They just kept looking at me like I wasn't supposed to be there. Legally, I had been declared dead at the scene of the crash. No heartbeat, no response. Covered with a sheet and tagged. Sent off like a package nobody wanted. But I was here now. Alive. They kept me overnight again. This time I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the drawer around me again. I felt the silence pressing in, the cold metal kissing my skin. I kept expecting to wake up back in it, as if my return to life was just a delay in the process. I overheard one nurse whisper to another that the morgue had already prepared my body for the coffin, that the funeral home had even been contacted. They had almost buried me. Almost. It felt like a delay, not a rescue. As if something had tried to claim me and missed, just barely. When they finally let me go, I didn't go home. I couldn't. Something had changed in me. The dreams were different now. I wasn't watching from inside the coffin anymore. I was watching from outside, watching myself, watching the lid close, watching the dirt pile high, watching until the grave was full. And when I woke up, the knocking didn't come from under the floor or behind the walls. It came from inside me, a steady, rhythmic thudding in my chest, as if something inside wanted out. I don't remember falling asleep the night it happened. I don't even remember lying down. All I know is that when I opened my eyes, it was dark again. Not the soft dark of night through a window, not the flickering dark of a television left on in a motel room. It was complete, swallowing, airless. My arms were pinned to my sides, my legs straight and stiff. There was a smell, old wood, glue, varnish, sweat, the scent of something sealed shut. I tried to move. Nothing. I tried to scream. Nothing. Just like in the dreams. Only this wasn't a dream. I felt it in my throat, that choking, burning weight of panic pressing down. My mouth wouldn't open, and no sound came out. I was locked in. My eyes adjusted to the pitch-black nothingness and still saw nothing. Just the void of an enclosed space. Then I felt the pressure, first in my chest, then in my ears, vibrations, voices, above me, muted, indistinct, but they were there. I heard the words, service, and gathering, and laid to rest. I heard crying, my mother's voice, my brother trying to hold it together. It was my funeral. They thought I was dead. Again. No mistake this time. No drawer to pop open. No technician stepping away for a cigarette. I was already in the box. They were going to bury me. I don't know how my body fooled them. Maybe my vitals dipped again. Maybe the doctors were just tired of explaining me. Or maybe this thing, the curse, whatever it was, had gotten better at making me look dead. This time, it had almost succeeded. I felt the shift, the subtle tilt as the coffin was lifted. My body jolted ever so slightly. Then came the slow descent. They were lowering me into the ground. There was a quiet moment, an awful, reverent pause before the dirt started to fall. I couldn't hear it. I could feel it. The weight pressing down from above. Thin layers at first, then heavier, faster. Each shovelful slamming into the lid with a dull thud that made my bones rattle. I begged myself to move. Just one muscle, a finger, a toe, anything. But I was frozen in my own flesh, screaming behind sealed lips. That's when I remembered what my grandfather had written in his journal. 3 knocks. That was the only signal he ever managed. The one thing that saved him. I gathered everything I had left. Every ounce of will. Every drop of strength. And I forced my hand to twitch. Then curl. Then rise. It scraped wood. My fingers bent awkwardly but found resistance. And I knocked. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then silence. I waited. Nothing. More dirt. More weight. The coffin groaned with the pressure. I knocked again. 3 more times. Still nothing. I was going to die here. For real this time. Buried in silence, knowing no one could hear me. But then, I heard a shift. Not inside the coffin. Outside. A voice. Far away. Then another. Shouting. The sound of feet. Frantic. Urgent. I knocked again. Harder this time. My knuckles burned. I knocked like my life depended on it. Because it did. And then I felt it. The coffin trembled. Something thudded against the top. A spade, maybe. Then again, and again. Louder, faster. A burst of air, light, and a face above me, terrified, wide-eyed, mouth trembling. A man, covered in dirt, reaching down with shaking hands. Then I was out, dragged into the light like a corpse reborn. They told me I was lucky. Again. They used that word like it meant something, like being pulled from your own grave by a fluke of timing and noise was some divine mercy. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt like something had gone wrong, like death had reached out, gripped me tight, and somehow I slipped through its fingers. They ran tests, brain scans, blood work, psych evaluations. They couldn't explain it. No trauma to my body, no damage to my organs, just some light dehydration, minor bruising on my knuckles, and an elevated heart rate that never really settled down. I didn't tell them what happened. I didn't explain how I was aware the entire time, how I felt the dirt, heard the sobs, knocked until I bled. They wouldn't believe me. Hell, I barely believed myself. And yet I knew. Every second of it had happened. I hadn't imagined a thing. My mother refused to speak about it. She cried when I came home. Then she went quiet. Like a part of her didn't believe I was really there. Or worse, believed I was, but shouldn't be. I stayed in the guest room for a while. I tried to pretend things were okay, that I could start over, that I'd escaped. But I hadn't. The knocking followed me home. At first, I told myself it was just echoes, trauma reverberating through my brain, phantom sounds, residual dread. But then I realized the pattern was the same. Always 3 knocks, always around the same time. Midnight, give or take a few minutes. Just like before. It was different now, though. The knocking wasn't coming from under the bed or behind the walls. It was coming from inside the house, from inside me. I'd feel it when I was alone, a thud in my chest, like my heartbeat wasn't mine anymore, like something else was beating along with it. I started counting them. 3 thuds, then silence, then 3 again. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night gasping for breath, unable to move. My body stiff, like it remembered the coffin, like it was preparing to go back. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I stopped talking to anyone, because no one wants to hear this story. No one wants to believe it's possible to be buried alive twice. And no one wants to know that the fear never leaves you. Not when you wake up, not when you're rescued, not even when you're standing in the sunlight. I started writing everything down, just like my grandfather, just in case, because now I understand. It's not a curse that ends. It's a cycle. He survived it. I survived it. But that doesn't mean we escaped. We were marked, tagged by something that doesn't care about medicine or miracles. It's not about death. It's about being trapped, and about how many times you can be dragged back under before something finally keeps you there. The journal sits on my nightstand now, half filled. My handwriting grows worse with every entry, like my body's slowly letting go, like I'm becoming something else. I hear the knocking every night, and now I knock back, not to be saved, not to be found, but to let it know I remember, that I'm not done fighting. But I also know, one day soon, I'll knock, and no one will answer, and that'll be the last thing anyone ever hears from me.